I always knew my family was different. We all had funny accents and spoke a different language than most people in New York. I don't remember most of the time I spent in Colombia as a child. However, I will always remember my parents saying moving to the United States was the best thing that ever happened to them. I wanted to use this research project as a way to understand my parents' childhood and their experiences in Colombia. Leaving behind the Colombian culture to embrace a brand new one was a lot easier than I expected it to be. As I got older, my view on Colombia started to shift into what was being portrayed in the media. A country plagued by guns, wars, and drugs. To look beyond all the negative characteristics that come to mind, I had to relearn Colombia as a whole. Colombia is a country at the northern tip of South America. It shares its borders with Brazil, Venezuela, and Panama. It encompasses a huge part of the Amazon rainforest, making it an extremely biodiverse country. It was discovered in 1492 by Alonso de Ojeda, one of Columbus' companions, whom the country is actually named after. Colombia is the world's leading export of emeralds, and it's famous for its coffee. Colombia is a country who has been stigmatized with a violent image made up of narco-trafficking, narcos, and armed militias. From the start, Colombia has struggled within itself, at war with drugs, corrupt politicians, and violence. Being at war with itself has provided Colombia with some huge setbacks as a country. It shows how unsatisfied the people are with the way the country is run. These guerrillas and paramilitary groups attract lower-income groups by painting a perfect picture of what Colombia could be. Unfortunately, pinning its people against the government. This inadvertently plays a huge role in the country's economy. Unfortunately, it continues to hold Colombia back from achieving the change and progress it strives to. Bogotá, as the capital of Colombia, is supposed to symbolize the country's change and progress over the years. It should demonstrate and stand for as a display of wealth, stability, and identity. Instead, it remains one of the most unequal cities in the world, with more than 1/3 of the population living below the poverty line. Colombia is not the only country to struggle with a strong division between the rich and the poor. However, the income inequality remains one of the worst in the world. Social stratification is defined as a system by which society categorizes people and ranks them in a hierarchy. Everything from social stats and prestige to the kind of job you're able to hold to your chances of living in poverty make up social stratification. This ends up categorizing and ranking members of society. In Colombia, social stratification has a name, estratos or stratums. In order to understand the system, it is important to note that the levels or zones are not determined based on income. It does not take into account the income, the number of people who make up the family, ages, jobs, or disability. Instead, the law determines stratums based on the place where you live, the conditions of your home, and the materials used to build it. The plan was started in the late 1800s for Bogotá, with the city emerging from a low-intensity war between the armed militia and the government. The system started in 1988 when the government divided the city into 6 stratums. By 1994, the system had become a law, designating areas or neighborhoods throughout the country into a classification system based on things like a yard, garages, and neighborhoods. The ideology behind this law was to achieve a degree of social and economic equality the country deeply needed. These stratums are given a number between 1 and 6, with 1 being the poorest and 6 the wealthiest. From this came the idea that those in the higher stratums will end up paying subsidies to help pay for the services like water, gas, and electricity of those in a lower stratum. It is interesting to note that approximately 90% of Colombia belong to stratums 2, 3, and 4. The higher levels live mostly in the north and make up only 4% of the population. Although the system has been around for longer than I've been alive, the idea behind it was to bring the Colombian society closer to social and economic equality. A strong separation by social divisions have emerged instead. With most people only moving around in their respective zones, there's barely any social mobility between social classes. Instead of bringing the city closer, a division was formed that can change the way people perceive the same city they walk in. For example, my parents who lived in the same city and walked the same streets never looked at each other while in Colombia simply because of where they lived. The separation between a 2 and a 5 was only a couple of blocks away from my parents, but both of them have different perspectives of the country. My dad has never admitted to growing up in the neighborhood he did as a Zone 2. He remembers having to walk for 30 minutes to avoid being dropped off in his neighborhood. Instead, my mother writes in her diary about how beautiful her new apartment complex located in a Zone 5 was, how excited she was to show people her new house and where it was located. The estratos are now even being used in everyday language to describe people. Anywhere you go in Colombia, you can overhear someone saying, "Wow, his level 2 is showing." What started off as a simple way of making services available to everybody in society at an affordable rate has instead backfired. The system is based on location, not income, but the people themselves have created an immense effect on them by equating themselves only to a number. For my parents, this ended up being a necessary move to an even bigger city, New York, where they met and got married. Despite its reputation as a drug trafficking and dangerous place, in reality it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. It's a diverse nation that is full of hope and promise, if you can get past being just another number or zone.